The Year 9 unit for this half term is a unit in writing dystopian fiction. So ultimately you will produce your own dystopian fiction, but before that we're going to look at various aspects of dystopian fiction, look at the ways that they're written, look at the ways that settings are produced in dystopia, and the types of stories and the different characters and the sort of problems that they have to solve. We'll study that quite closely before we start our own writing. Here we have a definition of dystopia. Now, dystopia is it's a story genre, so it's a type of story, has certain characteristics that are unique to, well, not unique, but that you would expect to see in dystopian fiction. So the definition: an imagined place in which everything is bad, typically a totalitarian or environmentally degraded one. Any word which has the prefix "dys" means bad or difficult. Dystopia literally means a bad place. I'm sure you'll all be familiar with dystopian stories. If I just list off a few examples: The Giver, which you studied in Year 8, Maze Runner, Divergent, The Hunger Games, Blade Runner, George Orwell's 1984, kind of classic dystopian story from which many others have sort of sprung forth. So I'm sure you're all kind of familiar with the idea of dystopia. The focus for the first week of this dystopian fiction unit will be we'll be taking a look at the different settings that are used in dystopia. Firstly, what we're going to have a look at also is the way that themes, typical dystopian themes, sort of interact and relate and can be affected by the setting, or looking at it another way, the way a particular setting might work with a particular theme. In addition, this first activity should perhaps provide you with one or two ideas about what type of dystopian story you will write yourself, and that is the sort of ultimate aim of the unit during the final weeks. Okay, so the first task is you will see on this slide a table. The table has 4 columns and 7 rows. You'll notice that the first column, themes, they've been completed. So those themes in that column are the sort of typical themes that you will see in dystopian fiction. Secondly, we have a column for time periods, then big settings and small settings. So we're going to relate themes to settings. What I would like you to do first of all is to think of some different time periods that a story could be set in. So I've put an example down, 500 BC. Think about the present. The present day could be one, could fill in one of the spaces, and think about any other times that you like. It could be the future, sometime in the future, set a date for that, or it could be sometime in the past. You might decide that 1066, the year of the Norman conquest, is a good year to write a good time period to set a dystopian story, or you might think that another time might be appropriate. It's up to you, but you have to complete some dates, past, present, and future dates in that column. They don't have to match up with the rows. Just put them in randomly in any order that you like. Secondly, the big settings column. Think here about countries, oceans, whole continents. So you could have Europe as a setting, you could have the Atlantic Ocean as a setting, you could have space, a planet. Think of sort of large scale settings. And again, space has been put in as an example. Can you complete all the other 6 spaces for big settings? And then finally, small settings. Just think of some individual small settings. Again, just think randomly, don't worry too much about where they are. I put cave as an example. You could put anything. It could be an aeroplane, could be inside a shop, a library, a garden, whatever you want. It's really up to you what you put in. It doesn't really matter. Random is fine, but think of small base settings. Okay. Here is an example of a table that I've completed. It's not expected that yours will look the same as this. These are just, just some random ideas that I came up with. I hope that you've come up with your own random ideas that might look a bit like this, but hopefully be different. Now, what I've then done is I've selected, in order to complete the next task, I've selected something from each column. So I've taken technological control from the themes column. I thought I'd have 500 BC from the time periods column, space as a big setting, and a cave as a small setting. So you will need to do the same. You'll need to select something from each column. They don't have to be in the same row. Hopefully you've got a kind of random selection of items here. You just choose something from each column. For example, I could have chosen environmental destruction, 2240, rainforest, waterfall. I could have done that, couldn't I? Okay, that would have worked just as well. So choose 4 that you think will work reasonably well, and then when you've got those, note those down, and then you'll be ready for the next task. Once you have chosen from each of the 4 columns, so you'll see here highlighted in green are the 4 choices that I made: technological control, 500 BC, space, and cave. You should have your own 4 items, and then what you're going to do with those 4 items is to try and write a 1-paragraph blurb for a dystopian novel. Okay, so if you'll look below, you'll see an example of the one I've put together based on my 4 elements. In a world without machines, machines control a world that worships them as gods. But when the skies fall dark, Rak, whose wisdom is unsurpassed, realizes that there is something wrong with the stars, and that the answer may lie deep below the ground in a cavern from which no one has ever returned. So you've got to produce something that looks a bit like that, based on your own 4 choices. It might take a couple of drafts to do it. You might have to scribble a few things out and change things to get it right, but you've got to end up with something that will look a bit like a blurb. Okay, and it may be the case that if yours works out quite well, I'm quite happy with mine, if I'm honest. You could use that as the basis of your dystopian story when you get to it in the final weeks. You may not, you don't have to, but it might be there, something you can do. We're going to have a look at another blurb from a real novel this time in the next part. Just in case anybody has forgotten, a blurb is it's a short promotional piece that accompanies a piece of creative work. So you usually see it on the back of the back cover of a story, don't you? It gives you a kind of flavour of the story and tries to engage you and entice you. It's designed to attract your attention, so it won't give a story away, but it will just give you enough details to kind of draw you into it and make you want to actually open the book and start reading it. So if we have a look at the blurb from The Maze Runner, which I'll now read. When Thomas wakes up in the lift, the only thing he can remember is his name. He's surrounded by strangers, boys whose memories are also gone. Outside the towering stone walls that surround them is a limitless, ever-changing maze. It's the only way out, and no one's ever made it through alive. Now, I'm sure some of you are familiar with the novels, the Maze Runner novels, or the films. Now, this, if you think, bear in mind we're thinking about setting and theme, and in this one it starts off with a small setting, like our 4th column. He's in a lift, and then it mentions a larger, a sort of big setting, towering stone walls that surround them, and it mentions a maze. We don't know what kind of world this is beyond that from the blurb, but we do get a sense of where this story is set, and this might be another example that you can use to help you construct your own blurb. Okay.